I'm creating a new project from a template in Revit called the architectural template, right? Which brings me to, let me do this from the start. So if I were to start up Revit, to show you the modeling defaults you're presented with and how we go about sort of laying out floors and ceilings. So I'm going to create a new project using the architectural template. That's going to give me two levels. So it defaults, presents me with at floor plan level 1, allows me to draw here. So I'm going to draw walls just without modifying any. I'm going to select this generic 8 and draw a rectangle. So we have 4 walls. And let's make it the size of our typical laboratory, 40 by 80 feet. So it's going to be 80 feet that way and about 40 feet this way. By default, the properties palette reveals that our wall's base constraint is set to the level you're drawing on, but it doesn't set a top constraint. So it draws these unconnected tops of 20 feet. If I go quickly to the 3D model, you can see what we have here. So the 4 walls I just drew, each of them are 20 feet in height. And that's sort of my 3D view. It gives me an elevation, uh, default elevation views, which are visible from the markers on level 1. Level 2 generally presents an underlay of the level below, but because the walls are 20 feet in height, it looks like I'm cutting through the midsection. Let's go to level 1. We're going to draw some floors. We'll use a generic 12-inch. And I'm going to select the rectangle tool again, and I'm going to go to the outside edges model here. And finish edit. Okay. For purposes of site topography, I'm just going to create a simple representation of Earth. By clicking topo surface of our site view, and I'm going to, it defaults to placing points. So 4 points at elevation 0, 0. Whenever you see a green menu here, it's going to give you this context specific menu. So 1, 2, at 3, it starts to triangulate the shape. So we got 4 points whose elevation is 0, 0, 0. When you click finish, it understands that to be site surface. So back to the 3D view. So we have a floor slab that's somewhat embedded at the surface level. Right, if I go to an elevation view, can't quite see the floor there. So let's do one more thing here. Let's cut a section through the site. View, section, and building section will do fine. I'm going to do cross section and a long section. So the two markers I just placed allow me to examine my model in section. There's a floor that I just created. There are my walls. I only have 2 levels by default. Now I'm going to draw at level 2 another floor. Using the rectangle tool. This time, exaggerate a little bit. I'm going to basically draw it so that some of it is inside the model, some of it is outside, so that we can examine it in 3D. Right? So if I go back to my 3D view, you can see what I've drawn. If I go to the sections, level 1, I can't see level 2 because that's the level above. If I go to this view and say pull the section, long section, across the floor that I just created, and also the cross section. So now when I go to the long section, I see that I created a floor on level 2. It sticks out a little bit from the back. And then I can select the other section from here as well. Go to that view. Right. For purposes of illustration, let's put in some default furniture. You may want to load some things. But there's a desk. I'll put 1, 2, 3 of them. Let's go to the level 2 floor plan. Okay, so what we see in level 2 is a ghosted image of level 1 below, but we see walls that appear to be cut through in section because they're 20 feet tall and they go beyond the cutting plane of the second floor. So I'm going to add desk to this level as well. Just placing them arbitrarily there. So again, when we go to our section views and see what we've done. Let's add some people. So I'm just creating some context. Entourage isn't loaded by default, so if we want people in here, we have to load family. Entourage. Male and female people. And let's just put some citizens on level 1. And level 2 as well. Okay, so now when we look at our sections, we have some people. Okay. By default, Revit creates ceiling plans for each level. If I double click on the level 1 ceiling plan, it's telling me where I am. We click on view range, and we see that a typical ceiling plan, cutting plan, is associated with this view. Right? So the top level of the ceiling, is the level 1 ceiling, is at level 2. And the cut plane is 7.6 above the associated level, which is level 1. It's important to understand how that works. Now, if I go to a ceiling plan for level 2, and I look at the view range for it, it's referencing a level above, but it doesn't know what that is. It doesn't have any level above. Right? So we have to go back to the elevation view and create an upper level by creating a third elevation bullet. And the way you do that is by, one way to do it is right click, create similar from an elevation view, and just drag out, and that creates a level 3. Level 3 is 20 feet. So all 4 walls, we can change them now. Instead of to be unconnected, default of 20 feet, we can actually say, have those walls go up to level 3. So they're constrained to level 3. And now when I change the height of level 3, say to 25 feet, let's change these markers so that they include my walls go up to level 3. So if I go to my 3D view, I click any one of these orthographic views, I can see what's going on here. All right. Let's also create another 3D view and use a section box so that we can examine the model more closely. So I'm not going to use the default 3D view. I'm going to duplicate this view, rename it 3D section box, and basically just check section box. Which draws a box around everything and allows me to bring in the boundaries of that box so we can examine our building in section. All right. So there's a floor we created on level 1, which we're cutting through in this view. There's a level at level 2. There's nothing on the ceiling yet. At this point, we may simply want to go to level 3. Okay, and we can't see anything. This is somewhat exasperating about Revit. When you add a level, it doesn't necessarily create what's called an underlay. So we have to set it explicitly. Let's have the underlay be level 2. So I'm on level 3, and the underlay is level 2, looking down. And I'm going to draw another floor. Use the rectangle tool. Basically make it a little bit bigger than the entire space itself, and then finish at it. Do you want the walls to attach to its bottom? I'm going to answer no to that. Okay, so what have we got so far? Let's go back to the section box. All right. And now we have a model. We have a complete enclosure. Let's talk about ceilings. Let's save this model. Call this ceiling lesson. We don't have any openings in the walls. We don't have a stair that connects level 1 to level 2, but for now, for all intents and purposes, this will do, because what I create, I want to look at in terms of lighting, in terms of the ceilings and artificial lights that we put in the model here. So I'm going to go to the ceiling plan for level 1, click on ceiling. I'm going to sketch a new ceiling. I will select this 2x2 grid system here. And notice that it is defaulting to a height of 8 feet. That's going to suit me just fine. So all I'm going to do is create a shape with a rectangle tool and make it somewhat, so it's going to be underneath my floor that I drew on level 2. And I hit finish edit. So there, now I have a ceiling. If I go to level 2, let's examine again the view range. Now this is going to be a little more meaningful because it has a top that it can reference. It has a cut plane associated with level 2. So I'm going to draw similar ceiling, level 2. Let's make that a little bit higher. Okay, remember we have 25 feet. So this will support a 12-foot high ceiling. I'm going to draw it. And that's the ceiling around most of the space. So if we look at our section box, you can see what we've created. We have a ceiling on level 2, which is at a height of 12 feet above level 2, which is at 10. So that ceiling's 22 feet in the air. Right? So it's important to have that third level as a reference. We can select the reference plane and see what's going on. So now, if we want to include lights in level 1, let's see what we have for lighting. Revit doesn't load any by default, so we would have to insert load family lighting. I'm going to choose, well, let's choose with the MEP lighting, internal. And let's load several different types. We don't have to draw all of them. Downlight, recessed, wall washer, and a 2x2 truffer light. Once you load lights into the model, they do show up, I believe they show up under the Systems tab, menu-driven lighting fixtures. So they will, you can select from them in the Properties palette here. So let's start with this 2x2. And you have to remember, for some reason, some families default to vertical faces. You have to select place on face so that it senses that it has a ceiling that it can draw on. I'm going to put a couple tiles in between each of these. Let's do the same. Ceiling level 2. The other way, my preference is actually to go down the properties to the project browser and load them, the lights, directly from here. Drag it into the model, place on face. You can create an array of, let's say you created a bunch of them. You can copy them. it saves you a little bit of work. They're not lining up to the ceiling tiles, that's okay. They don't always do that. Let's just move these. So you have to fix those individually. I'm not going to necessarily put them in the entire space. Okay, let's go to 3D section box view again. So here's what we have going on. I can change this to shaded. And we can illustrate a little bit what's happening. And now we can do a quick and dirty render switching to interior artificial only. So the only source of light I want to render are the interior artificial lights. So this will give me some idea of what I've created so far. Okay. It's a bit dull in there. We can adjust the exposure, make that a bit brighter, so we can see what's going on. All right. I'm going to keep these lessons below 30 minutes. If for some reason you wanted to save this rendering, you could save to project section box artificial light render. All right. And then go to a plan view, level 1, and let's say I wanted to create a perspective view camera with this corner looking that way. Drag through and click. So there's a perspective view of the model. And I can do the same thing. Render artificial only, interior, default resolution, which is a draft view, so it's not particularly high quality. Again, if this is a little bit dark, you can adjust the exposure. Programs like Enscape do that automatically for you. They create they automatically adjust lighting levels so that so you get a sense of some source of light. So that's how we place our artificial lights. If you wanted to save this view, perspective, interior, perspective, artificial. So generally what you're doing with ceiling. So you need a reference level for each. Make sure that you have, if you're going to be drawing lights on level 2, make sure you have a level 3 so the model understands what to draw on. We don't have any textures or materials in the model, so there's a lot of dull material that's appearing by default. So that's what we're looking at here. For example, the floor on level 1 is coincident with the top of the topography. So looks like we have some kind of earth pattern. 30 minutes. This is 30 minutes. Quick lesson setting up a interior for lighting.